Information discussed in this podcast may be sensitive in nature to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. The summer of 1952 was supposed to be a joyous one for many. It was the season of the Summer Olympics. President Harry Truman would be finishing up his term as President of the United States. And for 10-year-old Connie Smith, it would be a time of adventure as she traveled across the country to attend summer camp in Connecticut. Connie was living in Wyoming with her parents, and although her parents were divorced, they lived right next door to each other, and she was able to spend time with both of them. Her father was a very successful rancher, and her grandfather even served as governor of Wyoming. In June of 1952, Connie traveled to Connecticut with her mother. Her mother had family there, and Connie was going to spend a few weeks at Camp Sloan, an overnight summer camp. But things at camp didn't go as planned. First, she had a fall and broke her glasses. A few days later, she got in a fight with some other girls at camp, causing her to have a bloody nose. That morning, the morning of July 16th, Connie was given an ice pack for her nose, and shortly after, she told her bunkmates that she was going to go to the dispensary to return it, and she wasn't going to go to breakfast that morning. No one thought much of it until that afternoon when Connie was discovered missing. All of her belongings were still in the tent that she shared with the other girls, and the ice pack was sitting in the middle of her cot. An extensive search turned up no signs of Connie. Where is Connie Christine Smith? Hello, and welcome to a bonus episode of the Where Are They podcast. This case takes us way back to 1952. I don't usually cover cases from this far back in history, but Connie's story is really puzzling, and it's shocking that it's remained unsolved for decades, with very little answers or even clues throughout the years. It truly is a mystery. Connie was born Constance Christine Smith on July 11, 1942, to parents Helen and Peter Smith. Her parents would divorce when Connie was very young, but they continued to live on neighboring farms in Wyoming, and Connie would be able to spend time with both parents. In the summer of 1952, Connie's mom, Helen, decided to take Connie on a trip to Connecticut to visit her family, and for Connie to attend a summer camp at Camp Sloan. This would be an overnight camp that Connie would stay at for a few weeks. In the midst of camp, on July 11th, Helen and her mother, Connie's grandmother, visited Connie at the camp for her birthday. Connie seemed happy and even had mentioned to her mom that she wished she could stay longer than 3 weeks. But her mom told her that she just couldn't. On July 15th, just a few days later, Connie took a fall and would break her glasses. She had a really hard time seeing without them, but she was going to have to make do for the rest of the duration of camp. On July 16th, in the early morning hours, Connie and some other girls at camp got into a fight. Connie ended up with a bloody nose. The details of the fight aren't really known, but Connie would be given an ice pack and then she would go back to her tent. The girls didn't think anything about it. Shortly after, she told the girls in her tent that she was not going to go to breakfast. Instead, she was going to walk back to the dispensary and return that ice pack. The girls really didn't think anything about it, and they headed off to breakfast without Connie. Later that afternoon, camp counselors finally realized that Connie hadn't returned. Why it took so long to notice a child missing, I have no idea. But soon a search of the property began. It was even more troubling when they realized that she had left that ice pack behind on her bed, leaving them to wonder why she had said she was heading down to the dispensary to return it, when clearly that wasn't her intention. When workers at the camp could find no sign of Connie anywhere, they called local law enforcement in for help. They did learn that the camp caretaker had seen Connie picking daisies just down the road from the camp around 8 a.m. He hadn't thought anything about it because he thought she was a camp counselor. Connie was just 10 years old, but was said to have been tall and looked much older than her age. After interviews with neighbors and people living in the area of Camp Sloan, investigators learned of some additional sightings of Connie. Around 8:15, Connie stopped at the home of the Hobbs residence, also just down the road from the camp. She was asking directions to Lakeville, the nearby town. A few minutes later, she approached another neighbor, a woman by the name of Alice Walsh. She asked Alice for directions to Lakeville once again, and Alice did notice that she was crying. Both neighbors gave Connie directions, but none thought to help her, which is kind of odd. But then again, if Connie did seem much older than 10 years, maybe they figured she was okay. And it was also 1952. The world was a much more trusting place, although as we know now, dangers were still lurking out there. The trail of Connie's movements seemed to stop after asking Alice for directions. But another sighting would come in later of her on Belgo Road. Belgo Road was off of the same road that Camp Sloan was on, but it was 2 miles away. During the time of this search, Connie's mom had rushed up to the camp to help. Her father, back in Wyoming, immediately caught a flight to Connecticut to also help look for his daughter. He chartered his own plane to help in the search, and authorities brought out their own search planes. They searched on foot, and a local trail riding club also came out on horseback to help search for Connie. But no signs of the young girl were found. Law enforcement at first suspected Connie's mother, Helen. They thought perhaps she had orchestrated this as a way to have a longer visitation time with her daughter. There was a custody arrangement between Helen and Connie's father, Peter, and authorities thought that that could play a role in what was happening here. I think they were probably grasping at straws. And pretty soon, attention moved away from Helen and other theories and suspects emerged. First, a possible sighting would come in of Connie in eastern New York, and Peter thought maybe this meant his daughter was trying to make her way to Chicago, where they also had family. Peter immediately took off to Chicago, but again found no signs of his daughter. Then, another report came in that Connie was living with a band of gypsies in Amenia, New York. But when authorities got there to investigate, the band had already packed up and moved on, and they were never able to locate them. A man would call in another tip a little while later, saying that a friend of his said that he had picked up Connie while hitchhiking and took her to Arizona, where he then killed her. Police initially discredited this man's story, but on Halloween evening in 1958, skeletal remains were found in Arizona outside of the Grand Canyon National Park. They believed them to belong to a young teenage girl, which would have been possibly around Connie's age. They believed them to belong to a girl around the age of 15, 16, which would have been Connie's age at that time if she had been alive for the last 6 years. But also remember, she was always said to be tall and looked old for her age. They examined the dental records, and experts said that they really couldn't say for certain one way or another if it was Connie. There was no way they could make a positive ID. Connie's brother later came out in an interview and said that the experts actually matched 4 out of 5 points of her dental records, and that the one missing point was something that could have changed over the years, and that's why it didn't match, thus believing that those remains could have been Connie. In 1961, Connie's mother died of a heart attack without ever knowing what happened to her daughter. She had spent the last 9 years of her life searching and praying for answers that never came. Later on, a man by the name of William Henry Redmond would be arrested for the murder of an 8-year-old girl that he had murdered back in 1951, 1 year prior to Connie going missing. He would also be the main suspect in the disappearance of 10-year-old Beverly Potts from Cleveland, Ohio, a case, by the way, that has also remained unsolved. Redmond claimed to have murdered 4 other girls, but detectives investigating his claims couldn't put him in Connecticut at the time of Connie's disappearance and therefore were doubtful. However, some still do wonder if Redmond was involved in Connie's case, as well as the unsolved case of Beverly Potts. Over the years, several men would come forward and claim responsibility for Connie's kidnapping and murder. However, none of them were deemed credible, and there was zero evidence to link them to Connie's case whatsoever. It's always so bizarre to me that people would confess to a crime like this when they didn't do it. Connie's father continued to search for Connie right up until his death in 2012. He passed away at his summer home in Mexico at the age of 97. Connie's brother maintained that he would also continue the quest for answers in his sister's disappearance. Connie also has 2 half-sisters that I'm sure yearn for answers as well. So what could have happened to Connie? Did she just want to leave camp and find her way back to her mom? She had a rough few days leading up to her disappearance. First, a fall and broken glasses, and then a fight with some other girls at camp. Perhaps she did just want to go home. There was 1 more week left of camp, and maybe Connie couldn't stand it any longer. Was Connie maybe picked up by someone with ill intent? If she was picked up, where did they take her? It doesn't seem that Connie had reason to abandon her family, so if this is the case, it's likely that it was a kidnapping against Connie's will. But where is she now? Could Connie have wandered off in the wilderness somewhere and had an accident? She did have a fall a few days earlier, and she took a hit to the head the morning she vanished. Could she have been impaired in any way because of these injuries? Head trauma can present itself in different ways, that's for sure. There are also several lakes and ponds in the area that could conceal a body, either on purpose or on accident. But 71 years is a long time to stay hidden. Or do you think the remains found in Arizona back in 1958 could indeed belong to Connie? Authorities don't think so, but her brother feels it is a possibility, and those remains have continued to stay unidentified through all these years. What do you think happened to little Connie Smith? At the time of her disappearance, Connie was described as a Caucasian girl with brown shoulder-length hair and blue eyes. She stood 5 foot tall and weighed around 100 pounds. She was just 10 years old then, but appeared much older. She would today be 81 years old. Is it possible that someone out there knows something, even with so many years having gone by? Sure, maybe through word of mouth or even rumors, but it still might be helpful information in solving her case if it's brought forward. Anyone with any information on the Connie Smith case is asked to contact the Salisbury Police Department at 860-435-2938. Every missing person story needs to be told, and there are so many. Thank you for giving us a way to share them as many ways as we can. It's never too late to solve a cold case, and I really do hope Connie's case can be solved. Thank you so much for listening to Connie's story today and for being a supporter of our show, either on Patreon or as a subscriber. We truly appreciate it so much. We will be back again soon with another unsolved missing persons case. And until then, stay safe and hug your loved ones.